I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody. Welcome, West Point, Mississippi. We
Here we
are
are.
sitting here. Everybody's just...
He snatched me off of my freaking bulldozer for the first time. I've been on it in a while.
How dare you?
Just got everything just greased up and filters and everything just
What are
right.
you
And
working
maybe
on?
got 30 minutes worth of work. That's not even mind your business. You'll see. Maybe. If you're
Maybe.
nice, yeah.
I might get to see.
It's been
But
dry
anyway, it's
enough.
there when I get through, and I'm probably go right back to it. But it's hard to get off when you get started.
No, it is. You get so much stuff going on. It's fun.
I bet it is. I've never got to spend a lot of time on a
I saw
bulldozer.
young Brett, by the way, he's tightening
Yeah,
up all the
he-
stuff and greasing and taking my disc and
Rolling
heading up there to
north.
do your fire lanes for you.
That's right.
Lanny's going to be an arsonist here before long.
We're going to set some stuff on fire for
He
sure.
is. Yep. And he learned a little lesson from the other day. I said, no grass left in the fire lane.
I told him that about an hour ago.
All dirt.
Well, I'm looking at Alan Summerford. Traveled over here from North Alabama all the way, made the trip. We just got finished eating some fajitas.
Oh, it's just amazing what people do for free food.
That's right.
He looks like he likes fajitas.
Or one of my friends, I won't call his name, but if he ever listens to this, he'll know who he is. From a while back, he was talking about, and he grew up by the toughest, really. And he went on a honeymoon when he got married, and they went to, and it was just in the States somewhere, but he never eaten Mexican food in his life. And he said he looked at the menu, and he goes, "These sound good. I'll get an order of these fajitas."
Yeah.
I always think about it whenever we go to a Mexican restaurant.
Jalapeno.
How can you go
Fajitas.
through life and not eat in a Mexican restaurant?
You can't in the South.
No, not anymore.
Not anymore.
They're
Well,
everywhere.
when I was, I'm a little dated, but when I was a kid, there weren't any places.
Yeah.
No, that's right.
No, I remember it was a big deal to get to go to a Mexican restaurant when I was
Now
a
there's
kid.
5 in the smallest towns there are. That's like that's
That's
the
exactly
only
right.
the only restaurant that even makes it anymore.
That's true.
Yeah.
We've got 3 here.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
Alan was with us a few weeks back. We did a podcast. I was just so impressed. I enjoyed talking to you. I wanted to get you back over here. And
Well, that was
kinda-
quick, Bobby. He must. Let me ask you, Bobby. Do you have turkeys on your plate?
I got some quail.
Okay, yeah, that's probably worse. He's really romantic about quail.
He's
but
got a turkey on
most
his
of the
shirt,
time,
so-
Bobby has an agenda that involves feathers in
Yeah.
to some degree.
Most
So
of the
we've
time.
got a very healthy population of turkeys.
That I knew it.
Yeah.
You didn't even have to tell me. I knew it.
Yeah, you know what, Alan, you didn't have to do all
I
that.
just
but-
want to make sure you can see him coming and know there's always an agenda there, and it involves feathers. That's all. Just being honest.
So let's.
Well, I'm glad I wore the shirt I wore then.
Yeah, I like the
There's nothing on
shirt.
it.
I do like the shirt. So look, let's take care of some things we need to take care of instead of picking on me. Blood on the biologic. There is a big blood on the biologic. Toxie, I'm going to let
I knew
you.
he gave me a heads up to talk about this because it happened yesterday. But it's like just you telling me to talk about it. Honestly, I'm getting choked up a little bit. So shout out to my next to son, basically Will Dixon, and he took a really nice bull elk with his bow, and he was sitting with Daniel and Neil both. They took him to New Mexico, and it's just one of those things really special for people that are close to Mossy Oak. Knew that Bob Dixon and how much he had to do with the fact we're even sitting here today.
That's right.
And how much he meant to all of us. We talk about him every day. I mean, he's a part of our lives.
Literally
He's
do.
been gone 21 years. And the last thing he told me when he could barely talk, when they're like, Bob needs to talk to you. And I didn't know he could talk anymore. He was getting close to death. And he said, will you promise me you'll make sure Will has a place to turkey hunt and that he gets to go elk hunting and kill elk? Well, lo and behold, Miss Faye ended up with a guy we all love, Bruce, so much, and guess what? He had all kind of turkey hunting. So I was like, Bob probably arranged that for him anyway. But he'd been on elk hunts, and I thought he'd always killed elk. Well, Daniel Neal said, you know that Will never did kill elk on those hunts. And I was like, and before I even said anything, they were like, we're going to arrange for him. We've got a guy that's on our pro staff. He manages the place. It's really good. And blah, blah, blah. We're going to, buy the tag for him and go out there. And lo and behold, they just went and they drove they actually rented a truck so they could drive out there and come back with the meat and stuff. And they sent me that picture. Actually, it was a FaceTime from up on like 9,000 feet on the mountain. And I saw my phone, and I know it's hard. I know I'm probably going on a little too much, but to me, it's so special. I started getting choked up because I saw my phone going off. It said FaceTime video, whatever, Will Dixon, and I knew what was fixing to happen. And there they were. They were all on the mountain. They had just got their hands on them. And I finally said, good gracious, how many people do you have? Well, there's Daniel and Neil, and then Rob, I think, and then the guide. And he said, there's 5 of us. I said, no. There's 6 of you. And he started he said, yes, sir, Mr. Stocksy, there sure is. So it was so cool. I had to share that because for me, it was kind of a lifetime thing to happen after that and brought it full circle. I could just feel like Bob was sitting in the truck with us. So cool. So that's my big shout out, Blood on the Biologic, for probably quite some time.
Congrats to Will Dixon.
Yes.
That is awesome.
He was so, when you do something for someone, he couldn't even talk because he was so touched by all of it. And if any of you have been lucky enough to do it and you take a bugle, they said the bull went behind a big tree and when he drew, he didn't come out and he bugled it like 10 yards.
Man.
And they filmed all this. I can't wait to see it. So
yeah.
That's intense.
But if you've never done it before, it's one of the most amazing experiences. I still put turkeys at the top, but boy, killing a bugling elk point blank with that bow is right there with it.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
So
Wow.
appreciate you letting me talk about that a little bit. It was extremely special and emotional.
Yeah, absolutely. That really
Good
is.
stuff.
Lane, have you got anybody?
Oh yeah, I think we've had Dr. Joe Bumgardner. We call him Bo Doc. Turned 84 today. Killed a jam up deer during the Mississippi velvet season. And
170 something inches, right?
Yeah. He's gonna go book in a climbing stand, like 50-yard shot.
Oh,
83.
man.
83 years old. He's awesome. So he'll actually be here in a couple weeks. Going to be on the podcast with us. Going to tell the story.
Yeah.
He was a thoracic surgeon.
Yes.
And he used to be in the bowhunting group we had at Lake Haven and stuff.
Mississippi
and it was
Bowhunting
like
Association,
the most methodical, logical, like a computer bow hunter. Every single detail, so organized. He taught us so much just at the skinning shed. He would do like the
autopsy.
Yeah, and
On
he would
every
tell
one
you,
of them.
I pronounced cause of death, and it was something different. Even though 4 or 5 different deer, it would be shot right through the lungs. It would be different things that took their life, and he would tell you, sometimes they would collapse lungs, sometimes they bleed to death, and I mean there was just all kind of trauma to this, trauma to that. It taught me so much, just listening to him. So I can't wait to see him
He's
again.
a genius.
Yeah, he really is.
He really is. So happy birthday, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
That's
sir.
a heck of a deer.
Yeah. Good grief.
Yeah. So that's all I got on the Blood on the Biologic right now.
Two pretty good ones.
And I think we ought to I know we all agree, Cuz is taking up some stuff
Yeah.
to North Carolina. Our thoughts and prayers go out to
Man,
everybody up in
yes.
the world.
Turns out there's lots of. I actually this morning I had a long visit with Hank Parker, and his place got just demolished, and he's just dead. Plus, a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't know this because he hadn't called me till I called him to check on him. He fell out of a tree stand.
Hank did.
22 feet up,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
was airlifted.
He's okay.
Thank
though.
goodness
Yeah.
his grandson was with him, probably saved him. But he did say, by the grace of God, that the lady told him when they'd been in 5 or 6 hours in the hospital, checking everything, everywhere, especially they were so convinced he'd have to have internal bleeding and whatnot.
Yeah.
She said, you're going to be a first, Mr. Parker. He said, what? He said, you're the first person we've ever seen flying on the chopper, but walk out the same day. You can go home. Of course, they had lots of precautions, but he was just so sure he broken his neck and stuff. He's really lucky. And he was climbing up, just for everybody, he was with his grandson, and it was a ladder stand, and he wouldn't let his grandson climb up and put the lifeline in the stand. He is very careful about everything. He was climbing up to do it. And there's a better way than climbing up to do it. I know you can, but it was just a tree with lots of limbs, and it was so hard to do. And he was holding the stand for him, but still, there was just a little gap up there, and evidently it twisted enough. He lost his balance.
So he was putting the stand up.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm.
They were evidently putting the stand up to the way he told it to me. But he just said, to everybody out there, just if he can save one person by listening to this, to be, don't climb up anything without something attached.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I saw all that on social media. He's
did not know
70-something years old, fell and landed on his back and did not break anything. That's a miracle.
He said, his grandson said he bounced in there like 5 feet. He bounced so hard.
And didn't break a thing?
Mm-mm.
Now, he cracked some stuff, and he is it's been like 3 weeks maybe, and he is still in lots and
That's
lots
amazing
of
he
pain.
didn't break anything.
But because he's also one of the toughest guys I've ever known anyway.
he's
So,
tough, dude.
but he was relating to me. In fact, I was on the phone for 30 minutes before he even brought it up. He's not a poor, pitiful me guy
No.
at all.
Yeah.
But he was just heartbroken because there's so many people right around him in the mountains, and people can't get to him still. And like, a little girl, they find her, she's still clutching her mom, has been dead for days, that kind of stuff. I mean, I just got to say it because we all live in our own little world, and that's good. That's fine. We got to go on with life. But, man, just have the compassion. If there's something you can do, hats off to Cuz. He exhibits the heart that we can all look up to here. I can't tell you how many times he's done stuff like this.
Yeah.
Where something happens. Him and Greg Briggs both. I mean, I can remember 911 when Greg Briggs was loading up all our equipment and headed to New York until I finally found out he couldn't get in if he wanted to. But he was going to go, and he said, I'm not coming back till they don't need me anymore. That's the kind of heart they have. And I'm telling you, it just inspires me to be around people like that. Cuz is renting a big Bob truck, and we're going to, fill it up with whatever they need in this small town, and he's going to drive it over there himself and see to it. He's meeting up with law enforcement and game wardens to get to this little town that needs it really bad. So, for all of y'all that look up to Cuz out there, just so you know, he is meritorious of it. I promise you.
Yeah, I would agree.
So thanks for letting me say that.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. And gosh, I feel bad. I saw that with Hank, and I should have screenshot it and sent it to you.
That's okay. I had a really good visit. I need to catch up with him anyway.
Yeah, good. All right, let's look over here at Alan. I tell you what, last time you were here, we're just real impressed with you. I'd love for you to give us a little back history about how you got into hunting and got so logical and methodical about understanding all that goes into it.
Well, that's definitely been a long process. It definitely did not happen overnight. I grew up in North Alabama. We didn't have any deer at all. My granddad, my dad, my great-grand, everybody's just been passionate about land and passionate about cattle. And so I grew up around that. My granddad started buying some land down in West Alabama back in the 80s. He found some land super cheap back then and wanted to expand our cattle farm. And so he started buying land down there. Well, when he bought land down there, we finally had some deer. And those places had a lot of deer. And he finally started taking me hunting when I was 11 years old. I begged and begged and begged for a BB gun. I finally got a BB gun when I was 9. And I killed just about every bird, squirrel, rabbit, whatever was around the yard. I just had a passion for it, or an obsession. And just really got after it with a BB gun. Shooting, I would limit out on doves with a BB gun. And then I finally got to go deer hunting with him. And back then, we had doe days.
Boy, I couldn't sleep before that day.
Yeah. And so, we would always just see doe, 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 and never see a buck. And then finally, we got to go, and it was doe days. And my granddad told me, he's like, hey, we get to shoot anything today. Anything walks out, you're going to get a shot at. So sure enough, I shot. My first deer was a buttonhead. And shot it for a doe, of course, but it was a buttonhead.
Oh, they eat good.
And,
they do.
And really and truly what we did back then was it was a cattle farm, but he put a couple of food plots close to some woods, and we had a shooting house, and we hunted. And it wasn't like we looked at the wind or did anything. We just drove out there to the shooting house and we hunted. And so, years of that went by. I mean, my brothers started hunting a little bit, and they killed their first deer too, and still doing the same way. Well, as I got older, I wanted to bow hunt because, well, now I can hunt October 15th instead of having to wait till November 20th or whatever. And so I got a bow, and man, did I learn a lot when I got the bow. Just killing a deer was a feat back then because I was shooting a really slow bow. and big old huge aluminum arrow. I think I was using one of those Keller pendulum sights because somebody said you didn't need to have a rangefinder. You just put a dot on the deer and shoot it.
24-13.
But that thing was so loud. I mean, it sounded like you was, I don't know, banging a pan when that bow would go off. And I would hit deer on the opposite side of what I was even shooting at. And, just a whole learning curve. And but I finally bought a bow that was fast enough to hit a deer and started learning how to bow hunt, started killing some deer. And, well, that wasn't good enough either. Like, once I started killing deer, I want to get better. I want to go to the next level. Like, I don't want to just shoot a buck. I want to shoot a good buck. So, we kind of finally started getting into, like, hey, let's do 8-pointer better on our farm. And after everybody pretty much killed their first bucks, we killed some small ones. We killed some big ones, but, we were still shooting whatever. And then that progressed, and I started killing some really good deer. Once I quit taking the rifle, even during rifle season. Like, I am bound and determined I want to kill a big buck with a bow. And that changed how I really hunted because I had to get close. And so after doing that, then it's like, well, now I want to go to the next step and figure out, well, why did that work? Why did me getting close to that deer, why did that work? Started picking that kind of thing apart. And then actually started focusing on That's about the time where trail cameras were kind of starting to get big. So now you could actually go out there and figure out what's on the farm. You can say, well, I've got this deer. I want to chase this deer. How do I chase this deer? And that kind of sort of happened at the same time. My North Alabama place where my cattle farm is, we finally started getting deer there, and we got some pretty big deer. And so then I'm able to actually key in on a single deer, figure out how to kill that deer, and actually set the place up. It's not just go plant a food plot next to some woods and hope that one comes out. It's more like, well, let's design this to where when he comes out, I can kill him. And that really took off. I guess that was probably right around 2004-ish when I was really kind of starting to figure out. And I started killing a lot of deer with a bow and pretty much just hung the rifle up. Just bow hunted religiously. And like, if I can't get it done with a bow, I've got plenty of opportunity. Got a whole season. I'm going to get on him again and I'm going to kill him. Was kind of my mindset. And so, that sort of led me into where I am now. Like, once I figured out, well, I know how to kill him now. Well, now I've killed really, really good deer. Well, I want more big deer, which led me into the whole management side of things. And it's not just food plots. It's more about how do I create habitat that's not only going to grow a big deer, but it's going to hold a big deer. And now I'm going to create habitat that's also going to be good for my turkeys. It's going to be good for my quail, and bring that all full circle to make my farm as good as it can possibly be so that I have the most opportunities at what I would consider a trophy buck or an older age class buck and be successful at killing them. And that led me to Kyle Liebarger with Native Habitat Project. I finally started, kind of noticing some flowers and stuff on my property and had him come out. I was doing a timber harvest and had him come out and look at my stuff, and we became friends. And, kind of what led me to start getting out and like actually talking to people and seeing different people, seeing different terrain aspects and like, figuring all those things out and putting them on properties that made it to where people could go and understand why this works, how it works, and how to go and hunt.
Quite a journey for you.
Yeah.
Right. There's no doubt about that. So I wanted to try to start and key in with you and talk about how you go, once you identify a target buck on your place, at that point, what's next? How do you start? How do you then push in and try to figure out where you're going to kill them? And I'm really kind of talking bow hunting here.
Sure. So in the summertime, you're really going to be looking for like a high quality food source or a mineral site. I'm really just sprinkling cameras on the property to figure out what my inventory is. And usually I've got a pretty good idea what's going to be there because I'm running cameras, throughout the year on scrapes and stuff. And I know pretty well what deer are coming on the property during the wintertime and then what deer actually make it through. And then about June, July, I can start telling what bucks are there in the summertime. And a lot of times I just need to know that the deer is on the property. So sure, I've got history with a deer, like, because I'm waiting to try to kill him at 5. Like, I really want to kill a 5-year-old deer. And When they're 3, they're usually on the property and they've got some kind of aspect to their antlers. That's when you can really tell what a deer is. Some 2-year-olds, you can tell what they are, but most of the time it takes 3 years old to really figure out who they're going to be or what they're going to do. And then I'm taking that information and I'm putting cameras out to try to find, well, what is he at 4? Like, am I going to kill him at 4, or do I need to wait and give him more time and kill him at 5? And so in the summertime, I'm putting those cameras out, trying to figure out who I'm going to chase, what I'm going to chase. And I'm not necessarily putting them out in places that I want to kill the deer necessarily. I just want to get a good representation of what is on the property. Now, once I start getting those pictures of a buck that I want to chase, that's when I kind of hone in and figure out where to go and make it happen, where to go kill him, how to kill him. And majority of that relates to bedding. The biggest thing that I feel like most properties that I go on in the South that I see, the reason why they're calling us out because they're having a problem killing big deer is because they don't have quality bedding on their property. And that's to me, the biggest aspect of anybody's farm is like, you have to house the deer to have the best chance of killing the deer. If you don't have him on your property during daylight, they're hard to kill. You can get lucky. You can see them every now and then. You can get pictures of them all the time at night. But if that's the only time that you're seeing them, then you probably don't have great bedding on your property. And so now I'm going in, I have a target located. And you have to understand a couple of things too about finding a deer in early season. You're also playing with a lot of different variables that are fixing to happen. So things are pretty well stagnant all the way up until about this end of September. If you're in the deep South, this end of September, 1st of October timeframe, things pretty stagnant. He's going to be on that same pattern pretty well for a long time, about a 2-month period, just about. Then things start shifting. You got food sources start changing. You've got cover starts changing. They're shedding their velvet. They're shifting into more of their thicker type terrain that they're going to start using for the rest of the fall. Like they're setting up all of that. And so understanding like where deer are going to go so that when you lose a deer at this spot, where do you think he's going to go? And so like you're having to kind of play with all of that. And sometimes that can change on different years. Sometimes it happens earlier, sometimes it happens later, but just understanding that it does happen and knowing where to be and like having the most, like knowing the property well enough to where you know that like, if this happens, then this is probably where he's gone. That's what you've got to understand. And the biggest key to that early season is when you're figuring out a deer, is he daylighting pretty regular or is it going to be like sporadic? Well, if it's sporadic, then you're probably not real close to his bed because he's still not walking very, very far. He's not like he's going around checking scrapes or checking does and he's still going to be pretty tight to wherever he's bedding. And so understanding that and figuring that out is where the next step of the process goes.
Is there a way you can say that deer's getting up and he's, I mean, are we talking 300 yards? Are we talking half a mile? That would be like understanding this early bow season, how close he's bedding to his major food source.
Yeah, so it really depends greatly, and I know that's a terrible answer, but what it depends on is how high quality of a food source it is and what he has, to bed in. There are cases where it's not uncommon for deer to walk a mile and go feed at night. Like, for instance, if there's a really nice row crop field or whatever it is, like really, really high quality food, and the property that the food is on doesn't have very high quality cover, but there's a property adjacent to it 3/4 mile or a mile away that doesn't have good food, and he needs to go get that high quality food source, he's going to travel a mile. But if you can create your property to where you've got really high quality food and really high quality bedding close proximity, then you're going to be seeing that deer a lot more often on your property. And it can be within 300 yards.
Hey guys, listen up. Let me tell you about an awesome deal Springfield Armory is offering now through the end of 2024. When you purchase a brand new model 2020 Waypoint or Redline rifle, you'll receive a model 2020 rimfire rifle with a black synthetic stock absolutely free. That's an over $400 value on the house. You know we love Springfield Armory and their top-notch products you'd be proud to hand down to your kids and grandkids. So why wait? Learn more about this incredible offer at GearUp2024.com. Springfield Armory. Defend your legacy.
See these people? When the clock strikes 5, it's not the end. It's just the beginning. They have to do these things. They have to do those things. Enter the all-new LS Tractor MT2 and MT2E, a relentless force of innovation. Redesigned with a new hood and cab built for comfort and visibility, with enhanced lifting capacity to get the job done. Making these people the ones everyone else calls those people. Visit your local LS Tractor dealer today.
That bedding aspect.
Yep.
It's something that probably gets overlooked a lot.
100%, especially in the South, I think because everybody's used to, we have a lot of thick stuff, but that doesn't necessarily equate into quality whitetail bedding area.
So I got a question for y'all. How much do you think a deer eats?
Oh, we know this.
I figured y'all did.
I'm gonna let my buddy Bobby answer it because I'm gonna
turn around on you. How many calories does a lactating doe need a day?
I don't know.
A lot.
Yeah.
I want to say 20,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, really high.
Isn't that crazy?
And what was the dry matter number?
So I think it's like 8 to 12 pounds.
Yeah.
Something in that
Now,
neighborhood.
she requires a lot more.
Yeah, why
Of course,
she's
a bigger older.
Yeah.
Well, then that's the other thing. The great biologist one time said, "Imagine that you cut your legs off at the knees every year and have to grow them back.
Yeah.
So how much extra phosphorus and calcium have you got to have?
Yeah.
So think about those bucks, and that's why they're so Trey talked about standing crops and stuff in the summer. They're having to build all that back, so they need such an extra amount of that too, and they'll eat a huge amount. I don't know what the number is, but it's a bunch.
So when you picture in your mind quality bedding, Toxie, paint a picture of what you think that looks like.
I think it's kind of like what the Dr. Chamberlain them said about turkey nesting. They like to be hidden, but be able to you can't see them, but they could see you. So I'm obviously I believe thick is thick, but they would love to be somewhere where it's thick, but they can also see, and they've got a little more defenses than turkeys do. But honestly, it's crazy how unexpected a place you'll find them. I mean, right by the gate where they watch you go in and out, back and forth in all the time. Happens to us quite a bit. I get them on cameras, and I was like, Neil showed me. It's like, why are you putting a camera there? That means where we drive in every time. He said, just watch. And sure enough, there he is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. He'd have a better answer than me because in my life, it's been so unpredictable everywhere we've had down here in the South because there's somewhere that would be suitable bedding almost everywhere. There's not a huge separation like there is in other parts of the country. People are getting really good at prescribing that and building the best habitat for bedding, which for our whitetails is definitely thick. And then separating that by some kind of travel corridor. Yeah, that makes for great hunting, but it's hard to do.
Yeah. And the whole reason why I was asking the whole food thing is like, so you identified that 8 to 12 pounds, that's a very good idea. How much time do you think that's going to take them to eat that 8 to 12 pounds?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know that I know the answer to that, but
they can't eat that much at one time either. So
Yeah.
that just tells you how they got to cycle more. It's not like they get up right before dark and they eat and they go back to bed till that time tomorrow night. There's probably 3 cycles every 24 hours.
At least 3.
Yeah.
I would say probably 4. And you have one part of the cycle that's going to be a really, really heavy feeding. And so then you also have some cycles that's going to be more like snack feeding. And this is all going back to like how I'm figuring out where to hunt early season. It doesn't take them very long to eat what they need to eat. They're designed to be able to go out there and scarf down that food really quickly. And then they got to go back down. They got to go bed down to start chewing their cud and everything like that. Like they're designed to where they don't have to spend as much time out in the open getting that high quality food source. They've got to go eat it quick, go lay down. So that's why I say bedding is so important. I don't care what time of year it is, bedding is so important to have on your property to be able to hunt these deer. Now, when we go back to where am I going to hunt, I'm a moon phase guy. Not moon phase, but I'm a moon guy. Like I don't necessarily care about the phase of it. I don't care if it's a full moon, new moon, half moon, 3/4. It doesn't really matter to me. But what I'm really looking at is those major times and figuring out, well, what are deer actually doing? Like, are they going to be hitting a food plot today? Does it line up for that? Or is the major feeding time going to be more like midday kind of a time frame where they're spending that biggest portion of their day feeding? Where is it going to be? That's what I'm trying to figure out. So like knowing that like a food plot's more like your destination place. Sometimes they hit those food plots, those destination place in daylight, 4:30, 5:30, 6:30 in the evening in this early time frame. Sometimes they're going to spend that really good feeding time in their bedding area. So like when I create a bedding area, I want to have food in that bedding area, or food at least adjacent to it around it. Like when you're talking about a secure bedding area, it's got to have screening cover, but like deer actually use their nose more like we use our eyes. Mm-hmm. Their nose is the number one thing that they're using to bed. They will use, if they can use both, they will absolutely use both. But like when you have security cover, you shouldn't be able to see very far into it or out of it. And then they can pick and choose if they want to bed in the deepest part of it or in the edge of it or however it lays out. And sometimes, depending on which way the wind's blowing, they may do that. They may use their eyes for a part that they can't catch with their nose, and then vice versa. Sometimes they don't want to be seen at all, so they're hiding back thicker into it and just using their nose. And they're in enough cover to where, especially bucks, man, bucks will bed in areas that you absolutely cannot see them. And the only way to get in there to them
they can see you.
Is that they hear you coming through all the thick stuff. Mm-hmm. Like they hear, like if a coyote, a bobcat, or a human ever tried to get into that area to them, man, they hear you coming from 100 yards away. Or even if they're close to, if the bedding area starts and they're bedded just in the edge of it. Well, you can't see them in that, but as soon as you step into that, you're making all kind of racket. Well, all that buck's got to do, he's got the wind and he knows which way he needs to go, and he smells the way that is his exit route. So he's like, well, it's safe to go that way because I've been sitting here smelling this for the last several hours and something's coming from this way. Well, I'm bouncing out. And he's safe, and he puts cover between him and his adversary. It may be the knob of a hill or it may be thick cover, whichever one it is, but he gets something between him and that predator as quick as possible. And so that's secure bedding cover. Now, if you've got bedding cover that also has food in it, that's where you start learning out, like, if I want to go hunt an area that's like the major feeding time is going to be midday, like what they'll do a lot of times, they don't just go in bed in one bed for the whole entire day. No, they're actually getting up. They may bed in an area. It may be like on a ridge, it's got some acorns or something on it, or down in the bottom or whatever. But like they're going to bed for a couple hours, chew their cud. Now they're going to get up and move a little bit. And they may not move but 100 yards. They may get up and move slow over that 100 yards. It may take them 30 or 45 minutes to cover that 100 yards. But they're going to feed during that and then lay back down. They may not even leave that bedding area. They may still stay within that bedding area because it may be a 5-acre unit, a 2-acre unit, or a 10-acre unit, whatever it is, but he's going to get up and feed in that area. And then if that major feeding time is closer to dark, then he's going to get up and move towards that major destination place. And if it's close on your property, if it's in close relationship, then you're probably going to see that deer in daylight. And so those are all the things that you have to have on your property to be successful year in, year out, consistently being on deer year in, year out, is having all of that located in close proximity on your property. Now, picking the time to hunt, there's a lot of things that go into that. You know, we talked about a little bit the moon. If I see it's going to have a major feeding time more like midday, I'm probably not going and setting on my destination plot. Chances are I'm not going to see him. He's probably not going to get to that destination plot before dark. Or maybe it's a feed tree, or maybe it's an ag field, whatever that may be. He's probably not making it there till really, really close to dark. And so that's when I'll get a little bit tighter to bedding. If I want to see deer on days that are not necessarily those great days, I've got to be close to bedding. Know what they're bedding or know what they're feeding on. Are acorns just now hitting the ground? Like if you can get that acorn source close to that bedding, you're more likely going to see deer in that hunt as opposed to sitting back and waiting for that a little more exposed, a little bit harder to get to for that deer. And he knows that he's exposed when he's going to those. And so I'm setting up closer to that. And that way I actually watch deer do this all the time. I may get in there for an afternoon hunt, even in early season. I may get in there at 2:30, 3 o'clock. Because I want to make sure that they're bedded down while I'm slipping in. And I'm slipping in there super, super quiet. And I want to get in there and climb up because I know here in another hour or so, they're probably going to just get up and move 50 to 100 yards and feed around on that. And that's where I'm going to be in the game. And then when he gets up to get ready to go, maybe he's going to make it to the plot at dark. Well, he's getting up and I'm already right there within 50 yards of him. So I've got a really good chance of at least seeing him or killing him in that scenario, as opposed to you sitting back on the plot or that just, destination food tree or that ag field. And by the time you're ready to get down and get out of the tree because it's dark, that's when all the deer are kind of entering into that field. And so learning and understanding that part of the aspect helps you key in and focus on when to hunt different times.
So I got to ask, you talked about a couple things that are a big paradox, and one is bedding area also has food. Then you talked about finding especially when acorn trees first, for some reason, I don't know why, they are attracted to them more when they first start dropping. But either way, right close to the bedding area, how in the world do you keep from, I would not want to hunt a stand knowing a deer was 50 or, there's no way I could get in the stand without spooking them. For me, so, what preparations, how do you do that? Because you have to. If he knows you're there, the gig is over, and it's probably over for a while.
Yeah.
So that's my thing is that the early season, they hadn't been bothered. I think they do move that bedding and get a little more careless because nothing's bothered them. They don't feel threatened. So they don't want to have to go a mile to the food if they can help it. But you've got that shot. And once you bumped them one time, in my opinion, I've always said every time you bump them, you cut your chances of ever seeing them again by 50%. Well, if that's 2 or 3 times, your chances are about 5%. It's right. Not that that's exact numbers. So how do you do that? Give us some of the things you do and the links you go to be sure you can get in a stand when you know it's tight,
Well, the absolute best way to do it is to create it that way. And that's not, I know exactly what you're saying. I'm the same way. I'm super, super cautious about ever bumping a buck, especially a mature buck. Because like you said, you don't get many opportunities to bust him and then go and kill him. But in this early season, I am trying to stay in native terrain and hunt the edge of that part where I think he's bedded. I'm trying to create spots that are super, super dense, thick cover that when he's bedded down, I'm pretty sure he's going to be bedded there. It's going to be very, very light. It's where he's going to want to bed because it's got everything he's looking for. And so that's going to be, when I say when it has everything he's looking for, that's going to be woody browse. It's going to be forbs. It's going to be grasses. It's going to be shrubby, whether it's a shrubby tree that you've chainsawed and it's come back as a bush, or it's an actual shrub. And then down structure, like some trees with some down structure, like a few hinge cuts in there. It's going to be a combination of that, but it's also going to have, shade and sunlight, especially for early season. You can't have all sun. Winter bedding, you want more sun, and summer bedding, it's going to be a little bit more closed canopy type stuff. But I know where he's bedding because I've gone and created that area, and then I've created an access trail that I can get into it that I'm pretty certain deer aren't using, and it's usually going to be less management in that area. I'm not tricking that part out to the 9 because I don't want deer hanging out in that area. It's going to be wide open hardwoods or maybe it's a screened edge of a field that I can slip down that screen to get into that spot. I'm basically setting up to the side of it. I want to create the thick bedding here, the food plot here, and somehow or another, I'm going to come into this side of it. Mm-hmm. Now, most of the time, what people are doing on their properties is they're just planting a food plot because that was the open acres on the property. This is where we're going to plant the food plot because this ground's good. This is where we're going to plant the food plot because it's easy to get our tractor in here. This is where we're going because somebody else did it before me. Well, you got to take some of that out of. I've even planted food plots for years and then taken them out because I didn't like how I could get into them. If you can't access the stand, if you can't access to get into the area without spooking deer, then it doesn't work, and it needs to be eradicated off your farm. Like, devote that to wildlife opening. Let it be turkey brooding in the summertime. Don't plant food plot in it or whatever that may be. But create your food plots to where they're actually going to set up for this scenario so that you can not only hunt the food plot, but you can also hunt between the bedding and the food plot and slip into it and get that transition area that you may be missing out on. And so you just have to take every property, and every single property is different of how it lays out. But like, we like an outside in approach to where the center of my property is where my deer are going to be. And that's not where I'm going. I am stacking them in there, and I'm just accessing in from the sides, trying to get in and keeping that core area of my property is basically like sanctuary.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's kind of what Glenn talked about too.
100%.
Y'all remember I was just talking about the riskiness of hunting certain weather conditions, because you think it's a northeast wind, and but then things change and thermals and so forth. He just said it was the ones on the perimeter that he would be more careful with because he might bump them to start living on his neighbor. That's what he was talking about.
So the biggest thing is, like, if a deer sees you, it's not near as big of a deal, but if a deer smells you,
it's crazy.
It is out. I mean, you can hang it up. A lot of times a deer can see you, but not necessarily know what you are. Maybe they heard you walking in or something like that, and you hear one like kind of take off. But as long as he doesn't smell you, it's not near as big a deal. I feel like if a deer smells you, they are done.
It is amazing. Don't you think, though, if they smell you and don't see you, it even freaks them out worse?
Absolutely.
If they see you, they're certain of what they're seeing. They run off, whatever. But it's like if you're there and they smell you, I mean, just especially like in a food plot or somewhere, and you're at the edge and the wind shifts, they're not coming back. I mean, it freaks them out. And hogs are actually the same way. You can bump into hogs all you want, but if they ever smell you, they're gone. They move out of the area for a while.
And so when you're hunting these early season locations like this, I mean, this happened to me Sunday. I don't have very many opportunities to hunt like I used to. I don't have the time to mess up. I analyze every single aspect of the day before I even go hunt. And then I analyze every single aspect at the stand location that I think I'm going to hunt. Like, what is going to happen? First of all, you got to know what the wind's going to do. I mean, that's just a given. And when I say wind, that may be wind direction that the weatherman forecast, or that may be wind direction that the thermals are going to happen. Because most of the time, those big bucks are not going to move really in that evening time until that thermal shift starts to happen. And that's, you've had a predominant wind all day long. It may be a 5-mile-an-hour wind. It may be a 10-mile-an-hour wind. Or out there at dark and that sun starts setting, thermals start taking over because that wind speed starts dying down. And that's most of the time when you start seeing that movement really pick up. And those bucks are keying in on that thermal. So you may have the wind that the weatherman forecasted is in your face and it's perfect. But if it's something that's slightly downhill, or especially in the summertime or this early time frame, if it's really shaded and where you are is sunny, or if it's a creek or a bottom, anything lower than you are, all of a sudden when that wind dies down, that's where things are going to start shifting. So is this a sunny day and you know that the wind's going to die and thermals are going to take effect? Like, you better make sure that that deer's not downhill from you, because he's going to smell you and you're not going to have a chance. But then on cloudy days, you can get away with a lot of stuff. A cloudy day, you can have very, very little thermal draw because the temperature's going to be, say it's going to be 70 degrees at 4 o'clock and it's going to be 69 degrees at 8 o'clock. You really don't have that big drastic change of temperature as the sun goes down. It's just going to kind of be stagnant, and you don't have that really hard change of temperature right there before dark. It's going to pretty much be the same. And then you can kind of get away and just use the weatherman forecast. But that's what sort of set up this hunt for Sunday. I had some bucks that I knew were using this little area as a small little 2-acre bedding thicket. Part of it is something that I burned to create the open like field aspect of it. It's like super diverse forward field. I mean, tons of partridge pea. It's got rattlesnake master, coreopsis, like blackberry briar, sumac. Like, I mean, just like a really, really diverse small field. And it sets up on this ridge. Right behind that ridge is where I did a timber harvest. But I did a very, very strategic timber harvest. I clear cut about a 2-acre spot on a slope that I knew that is super secure, that no matter how I go around my farm, that little part of the farm that I clear cut, it's just below 2 different ridges, and it sets up, deer think like they love to get right there because you could never hunt that spot if you ever tried because your thermals would never work. It drops down into a bowl, and the deer love to bed on that little spot. Well, then I've just enhanced that little spot that they like to bed on anyway, and as I know, the deer that are using this big 2-acre plot out here, I know exactly where they're coming from. They're going back and forth. They've been doing it all summer long. Well, now I've just got to figure out the day that I can hunt it. And the main reason I went there on Sunday, it was right after this hurricane came through. The wind blew 2 days straight up there, 18 to 20 miles an hour. Normally on opening weekend, if I have the chance to hunt that farm on opening weekend, I have 3 different trees on the farm that I know will drop acorns before any other tree on the farm, and they're chestnut oaks. And deer won't touch them after the wild oaks start dropping. And my initial thought was I'm going to go hunt one of those chestnut oaks on Sunday after church. And I walked in there with a saddle on my back, and I walked up to the first chestnut tree, and I didn't like what I saw. It was not as hot as I was expecting it to be, and I'm like, well, something else is going on. And so immediately I'm like, I ditched that spot. I started walking. I'm like, well, I already know that deer are going to be bedding in this little spot right here. And this acorn tree actually sets up for that bedding as well. But I was like, I bet the trees up on top of the ridge are probably going to be dropping a bunch of acorns out because of that storm. The wind probably blew some out. Sure enough, as soon as I climbed elevation just a little bit, I start seeing the tips of tree limbs with acorns attached. It's like leaves and acorns all. And it's the higher I got up on the ridge, the more I saw. I'm like, oh, well, they're definitely going to be hitting this food source. So now I'm figuring out, all right, well, with this wind, I don't really like this wind, but I can actually make it work because my thermals aren't going to drop to their spot. So I slid in there, set up I got set in the tree at 3 o'clock. And I'm like, this is early season now. Most people won't be in the tree at 3 o'clock in early season, but I know that deer, also the major time was also like at 2:30. And so I know deer are probably going to be feeding here very, very shortly. I got set up in there literally 30 minutes. I watched the deer get up out of his bed, fed around for about 10 minutes, bedded right back down. He didn't move 20 yards, and he was feeding on acorns. I was like, all right, I'm in the game. Sure enough, a little bit later, another deer did the exact same thing, fed around on the ridge for a little bit, and I watched him lay down. I'm like, all right, and it's two nice little 8 points. I'm like, yep, this is probably going to be a good day. And my other buddy was hunting pretty close by on another property, and he was hunting a food plot, and he had pictures of his buck on that food plot pretty well every other day, just about. And I'm like, you're not going to see him on the food plot. He's going to be on acorns today. Sure enough, right before dark, I see some bucks coming, and this is a rookie move for a saddle. This is the 3rd time I've ever even sat in a saddle in my whole entire life. But I see them coming, and they're actually coming right down the tree line, right down the edge of that native field that I was talking about. And I was expecting them to cross the native field to come to me, but they didn't. They looped around, probably because the thermals weren't working for them, and walked right straight to me. And instead of me being, knowing what to do in a saddle, I tried to take my bow over the top of the bridge and to have my bow on the right-hand side of the tree to where I'd have a shot. I can see the shooter. He's at 25 yards, and these 2 other 8 points are right here in front of me, and they're fixing to be all the way behind me. My wind's good. All that's good. I just needed my bow on this side of the tree. What I didn't realize, what I should have done was slipped around the other side of the tree. He stayed right there at 20 yards, and when I tried to draw through my bridge, it was just really, really awkward. And with me trying to get drawn on him and this other deer at 10 yards, I bumped that little deer beside me. And he didn't even spook. He actually kept eating on acorns. And so then I'm trying to figure out how to draw around the other side. And by then I couldn't ever make it happen. And he stepped behind another tree, and I just never did have a shot. They finally walked off. I slipped out and got out of there. But all of that worked because I had the understanding that the deer were probably not going to be on that highest food source. They were headed to that plot, but they were going to be there way after dark before they got to that plot. They're hitting this transition before they get to their feeding. They fed right outside of their bed. I mean, I was hunting 50 yards from their bed. I actually watched deer bed during the hunt, and then deer get up out of their bed, and I was right there and that close to them so that I saw them before shooting light was over. I had 30 minutes to kill this deer. I had just made a rookie move and didn't happen. But understanding all of those things, it's not just you go, you pick a spot because I've had pictures of this big buck on this food plot. That's where I'm going to hunt. You got to understand everything that's going on with it. It's the moon position, the major feeding time, what happened yesterday. Was it a windstorm? Because like things are changing so rapidly right now. I mean, acorns could just start dropping between last time you were at the property to this time you're at the property. Like understanding is that going to be happening? Like so that you can actually put yourself in the game and be in position to kill the deer and have a better chance at it. And the whole reason I asked you that question about how much do deer eat was to set this part of it up is how much do deer bed? Majority of the time. And if you're close to that good, high quality bedding, majority of the time you're going to be in the deer. And so if you have good bedding on your property, there's a better chance of you seeing those deer in daylight when you're hunting close to them and catching that food source in transition than just hoping for a destination food plot to set up for.
Hey, Lanny.
Hey, Bobby.
Have you ever wondered if your feeder went off or if it's even got corn in it?
Yeah, you sit there at night wondering about it.
Moultrie has solved this. This is some high-tech stuff.
Fits on any feeder that helps monitor the level of feed and lets you know if it went off or not. And you can remotely control it.
Can I look at your feeder if we're on the hub?
I really hope not, but we're going to have to talk to the guys at Moultrie about that. This is the biggest thing in feeders since corn.
That's saying a lot.
With Feed Hub, there's no more stressing, no more guessing. This technology allows you to remotely monitor your feeders.
You know, we always say feed safely, do it the right way.
No doubt about it.
To learn more about it, visit moultrieproducts.com/feedhub. It's a great invention.
Unbelievable technology and products brought to us by our buddies at Moultrie. My man is doing some thinking.
Yeah, he is.
Well, I mean, he said all that, and you could learn from all of it. But at the end was the most important. If you don't have the bedding, then you're not going to have the deer,
That's
and
right.
you're likely not to have a lot of chances at them, especially once things get cranked up. So most people that are successful, they are hunting. I just don't see how you consistently get that close to bedding, and I realize you map it out, and you probably go pick up every stick and have a hidden entrance
are you
to it
raking
and
out
everything.
trails?
Sometimes I do. This one wasn't,
Yeah.
but I just had, I mean, it was I'm only stepping off my main road about 50 yards.
Huh.
I'm getting
So it's not
old.
far.
My dad would say, he used to have an expression, his son, you sound like a pregnant elephant on cornflakes going through the woods. So it's, I just don't say, I'm so worried about bumping them that I wouldn't be brave enough to get that close. But clearly, I've often said too, if you know deer are out and active early before daylight, go get in that spot an hour or two before it even gets daylight. I mean, I think some of the really good ones, people do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole thing too with that. Like, the deer are feeding about 4 times a day, and that time that they feed shifts just a little bit every single day. And so when you have that major feed time that lines up with, daylight or dark, then, that's when I'm really going to try to get on a food plot, because I'm probably going to see them out in the open. Like you just know you're driving through a place that you always drive all the time, and there's certain days like, man, deer out everywhere.
Yep.
And it may or may not be even associated with the front. It's just, you just pick summertime, for instance. You man, there's deer. You're seeing deer in places you don't normally see deer at all. And then you got the fields that normally always have deer in them just about every single day. There's more deer on that day. Well, that's what happened, is it's just that major feeding time hit at that time of day that they're up and they're getting farther out, into that food source.
So I'm a big believer that there's at least one thing that totally trumps the activity cycle and the moon phases, and that's the weather.
Yeah.
And I've found this by my own experience again and again and again and again, but an extended period of bad weather or rain, if you could actually go be in the stand before it quit and, you're tough enough to get up in the rain, you'll experience an event just like hunting at night or something. The deer will be moving everywhere. And it doesn't really matter what time of day it is. If it's it's not that if it just rains a little bit, but just say, it pours and storms. And they don't really like getting around to that. They will, but not a lot. It shuts a lot of it down. And a few times I can remember going out in the morning and going on out in it's been raining all night, as Bob would say, pissing and pouring and storming. And then you're out there already when it quit, and it's like, oh my God, am I hunting in a zoo? What's going on? Deer are everywhere, and also that sets a cycle again where they feed real heavily then, and then they're affected by that. So whatever, 6 hours later, 8 hours from that, then they feed again. It kind of it seems like the longer it's pretty weather, then the more they get into a cycle time with that, and the more the predictable they might be.
Absolutely. And that's why, it's early season, we're getting some storms and stuff now. So we're getting a little bit of weather changes and stuff in this early part. A lot of times though, we don't get that. A lot of times this early season is going to be pretty stagnant. You may have a week at a time that the wind doesn't really change just a whole lot.
We're fixing to get one of those right now.
The weather doesn't change a whole lot. So that's when I extremely hard key in on these major times to know, well, where do I need to hunt? What are deer doing? Were deer out feeding, at 4 a.m.? I don't hunt very many mornings in early season. It's got to be more like a windy morning. If I catch a front coming through and it's going to be a windy morning in early season, I'll hunt it. But otherwise, I'm not hunting the mornings because I just can't get there. Now, once you get that kind of shift where you start getting to that pre-rut time frame, and I'm absolutely hunting mornings, but early season, it's mainly afternoon hunts. I want to know that they're bedded down when I go in to go and hunt them. And you've got a lot better chance of having that in early season. And so, but like you said, the weather events absolutely changes that whole entire major time, for a fact, for sure. And you talk about the time after the front. I like that time before the front too. I set majority of my stands up. I set up with a northwest and a southeast. Those are the two most predictable times to kill a buck, in my opinion, because what you have happening with a southeast wind is, especially when you've got a north or west wind for several days in a row, the first day it shifts to southeast is that morning it shifts to southeast is usually really good. Because, like you said, when that front comes, they don't know how long that front's going to last. It could last 2 days, it could last 1, it could last 30 minutes, but the deer don't really know that exactly. They can feel it coming. They'll feed up so that they don't, because they may not know how soon they can get back up again. They don't like feeding that really, really hard weather event, exactly like what you talked about, but as soon as it's over, they're back up again. But they'll like to bank up that day before, and it could be a lot of times the southeast. First day it changes from northwest to southeast. It may even be a frosty morning. I've had extremely good success on those mornings. Afternoon hunt, usually not all that great. And then the front hits that night or the next day, and then you catch that northwest wind on the backside of that front. But that's when you kind of throw the whole major minor thing out the window, and you're not really worrying about wind. The major times you're more worried about what the front's doing and what the wind's doing. And what's causing those deer to feed at that time is, well, the front's on the way. They're bunking up so they can go bed down.
So do you? If we looked on your phone, if you got an app for the weather that you like that gives you the wind and predicting what the wind's going to be in a week,
I usually use OnX.
Most people
that's good. Yeah.
Very good. But his point that northwest and southeast, you have a better chance of a consistent wind. As it's switching, it makes that transition. When low pressure, high pressure goes by and it turns around 180 degrees, you'll get a lot of what I always used to say, the three most feared words in the English language for whitetail bow hunters: light and variable.
Yes.
And so you get that, or some of the older people that were really smart I grew up listening to, they would say, son, you're wasting your time when it's one of them swirly wind days. Because They don't really like to move them because they can't count on it. And guess what? You're going to, no matter what direction they're coming, they're probably going to smell you. And they just, back in the old timers, they just call it swirly wind days. But, man, I have wasted more time and busted more deer insisting on going hunting on days when it was poor conditions.
Yeah, and those poor condition days like you're talking about, that's the day I'm going to go shoot a doe. I'm not going and chancing, getting in tight to betting that I don't know which way the wind's going to blow. Now, if you're in hill country, you got some terrain, that's not this part of Mississippi. A lot of my properties are bottomland stuff, just like what's over here, and really, really flat. And I'm not hunting on those swirly days. If I am, I'm going out to the outskirts and I'm shooting a doe that might cross over on my neighbor. But if you're in terrain, when you got that light variable, then thermals are at play, and you can really, really bank on thermals on those days. Sometimes when you have a stronger wind and you're in more hilly terrain, your thermals and wind are kind of back and forth and pulling at each other, but then you get that really calm day, thermals are really strong. They're way stronger than any wind at that time. And so then you can kind of count on, well, I know I can get here or here, whether it be low or high, depending on slope aspect and everything. Then I know I can get here and know that thermals are going to take over and I'll be safe to hunt. And so you can, if you have that kind of terrain, you can hunt on those calmer days.
So how are you figuring these major minor feed periods? Is that just looking at the moon, studying that?
Yes.
Because it's real interesting, Lanny. We have
very interesting.
Yeah, I mean we've had a
lot of conversation.
About the moon,
yeah.
And
it obviously has a lot to do with fish feeding too.
Oh yeah.
But all I'm getting at, in my opinion, it's still trumped by the weather.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So give me a quick rundown. If I'm a guy and I'm looking at the moon, how can I determine how this is going to affect, in your opinion, this feed?
When it's straight up.
Yeah,
right?
Overhead, underfoot are the two strongest pull. That's when the moon's pulling the hardest on, the gravitational pull. And for whatever reason, it makes deer want to feed. So overhead, underfoot time. And when those times, you have some days that are overhead, underfoot at sometime in midday and midnight. So that's when I'm trying to key it. I'm gonna hunt closer to bedding when it's those days. But when I've got overhead, underfoot that is real close to sunset or sunrise, that's when especially sunset. I would rather it be sunset.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's closer to sunset, when those times line up, buddy, your food plots, ag fields, that early hot feed tree, that's when you hit those.
It moves forward about 50 minutes a day, right?
Yeah.
That's about right.
And it's about a 2-hour window. And so you can go, there's websites you can go to and find all this. A lot of apps have it in it too. But it's about a 2-hour window, and you can just kind of look and time those up to know, well, I'm going to go hunt today. What day do I need to hunt, or what time do I need to hunt, and where do I need to hunt? That's what I'm going by.
It's pretty interesting.
Very interesting.
But have you ever, has anyone ever explained, I've listened to a lot of biologists, I'm not sure anybody's completely explained why, and this is just fact, the best afternoon food source hunting is always in super high pressure, dead calm, pristine, blue sky, high pressure, and deer feed so much earlier. And is it just because of the high pressure, or is it because they just feel so much secure because it's, the kind of day they like to move on? I've never had anybody explain it. I just know everybody knows it and everybody talks about it. Have you ever heard why?
Oh, I don't know why.
But it's true.
It's true. And also low humidity.
Yeah.
Those typically go hand in hand.
That's right.
Yep. One thing I know about deer is that deer smell a lot better when it's a higher humidity.
Right.
Scent molecules stick to water. And so that's why I don't hunt mornings in early season much, is because, man, the last several mornings we've had just heavy fog, heavy dew, and dead calm wind. That's a recipe for disaster.
Your scent's just going everywhere.
Yeah. You have no direction that your scent's going to go. It just dissipates all the way around you. And so that's a recipe for disaster if you're trying to bow hunt. As soon as a deer gets in range, he's smelling you, no matter which way he comes from. And so that's one thing that's really, really difficult early season why I stay away from the mornings.
Do you feel like when it's really cold and we had a hard frost, that when the sun comes up, that everything's rising and you got a little bit of leeway there?
Yep, I do.
Yeah,
For sure.
That's another. I keep talking about it. That's another Bob Dixon. He taught me, because he was actually rifle hunting some too. Then, but he would climb 30 feet up in a climber on a cold, frosty morning and pretty much just wait until up in the morning, and he would see more deer and he would have less chance of being smelled. He thought
for sure, and like I do a pretty strategic scent regimen. Like I'm not the most like scent fanatic guy, but I'm definitely not the least. And my wife says I am the craziest because like she likes to use this bougie washing machine stuff, and people talk about how good I smell and stuff, and I'm like, I hate this stuff. Like it's the wrong time of year to be smelling good. And
there's that word, Lanny. It pops up every now and then.
Doesn't it?
I don't. What does that mean?
Fancy.
Okay.
Yeah.
fancy schmancy. Come on, Bobby, you know what it means.
Bobby,
that's what all the young kids say, supposedly.
you're kind of bougie.
I think Bobby's culture came from agriculture. I think.
I am not bougie.
But yeah, I would prefer that from about August until February 10th, that the only kind of stuff that went in the washer was like all free and clear or hunting detergent, but like that's not what I've got. So like I usually will try to I'll wash like a load of towels in some unscented detergent, run them through the washer, run them through the dryer, then I'll throw my hunting clothes in there, and then my hunting clothes stay outside all the time.
Don't you hate bounce?
Yes.
I get so aggravated about bounce in the dryer. Oh my gosh, you can smell it forever.
It never comes out.
Plus, I guarantee you it's got something that's not good for you. It's some kind of chemical.
I agree.
We were close to having a sponsorship with Bounce, Richie. We've been in on,
but it wouldn't be proper. There have been companies, I guess they weren't successful, sell, whatever, dryer towels or whatever for deer hunters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But he's right. The best sin's no sin. That's age old. And, I mean, you can't beat it at the end of the day. However, the less you have, the better it is.
Yeah, and so like the more I learn about scent is like you can't beat a deer's nose. Like I don't care what you do,
God.
you can't beat their nose.
It's unbelievable.
But I do all of that because I'm bow hunting, and I want to give any edge that I can to like if that deer gets downwind of me, and they get downwind of you sometimes. Like that's just impossible. Sometimes they just do.
Sometimes those older deer won't approach anything that's important
Sure.
unless they circle around downwind first,
And if I have a split second, that could mean the difference of me killing that deer or that deer blowing out and being gone. And so if I can just confuse him for just a minute, just long enough to get that shot off, that's what I'm trying to do. But I say all that to say this is like, you can't get away from scent. You can't do anything to keep them from smelling you. But like when thermals are rising, people talk about, well, I do this, this, and this. Man, I have deer downwind of me all the time. I shoot deer down. Well, most likely they were downwind of you, yes. But it wasn't because they were downwind of you and they just didn't smell you. It was your thermals pulling up or something that the scent just didn't reach their nose.
Right.
When the scent reaches a deer's nose, they throw their head up. Mm-hmm. They start doing this whole head bob deal, especially if you ever watch a doe out on the food plot that your wind shifted or your thermal fell to her. You're like, I know my wind's good. It can't be blowing that way. But when she walks across there and all of a sudden throws the brakes on and that head goes up and they start, and she smelled you. I don't care what you say. She smelled you.
Yep.
And so that's why you can't get away from deer's nose.
No, when they put that nose way up in there and bob it up a couple times, like they're reaching their nose high as they can, you don't have long.
No.
All right. So look, you're talking about that split second needing to get a shot. So I'm going to ask you a really serious question here.
Uh-oh.
So if you're up there and obviously you're hunting out of a saddle.
This has just started. Third time.
It doesn't matter. Let's just go through a scenario. I mean,
maybe the last. It sounds like.
Yeah, this is the latest, greatest ways people put guys. It's impressive the way these. I don't know that I could do a saddle.
No, you could. They're real easy.
Yeah, they're not bad.
But so let's just say you're up there, and you got 100-pound doe coming to you. She's wound up like a rubber band, tight as she's gonna drop when you shoot. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt she's gonna do that. You're probably thinking about that. You're factoring that into your shot. But then you get a 5-year-old buck up there who has stood off and looked and watched, and he finally made up his mind. He's coming up there, and he's confident now that he's up there and he's crunching acorns. Are you thinking he's going to drop?
No, not near what a doe will.
Yeah.
I mean, I have seen so many times, I've videoed a ton of does that whether they're feeding on acorns or whether they're not, or whether they're nervous or whether they're not. In fact, sometimes when the doe's extremely wound up, they don't drop near as much as one that's just calm as they can be feeding on the food plot. But a buck, man, those mature bucks, the majority of the time, they stand there and take it like a man.
Yeah.
They don't, they like you said, they're focused on so many other things. And now they do drop the string, and I've spine shot bucks before, like good bucks. I shot them right in the spine because they ducked. But the majority of the time, they duck way less than a doe.
And it seems like the older or the larger they are, the less that.
Well, they're not as athletic as a
Right.
doe is.
Well,
like
maybe
that,
that's it. Maybe that's it. And so, is there a relationship to a deer's head being down to the amount that she drops?
For sure.
So, when in the old days, we used to say, let them start eating and be relaxed. And that's kind of.
Well, it might help some, but you got to understand it has nothing to do with your bow and your arrow and ducking out of the way. If you're up in a stand and there's a doe or a buck or any of them, and you were to clap your hands really loud, they do the exact same thing.
Yep.
They're just dropping down to get gravity to push off with.
Yeah.
That's all they're doing.
They're loading up.
Yes,
Loading it.
exactly
That's right,
what they're
loading
doing.
up.
But now, if her head is up, she's not dropping as much as
So-
if it's down.
Sure. Because when their head's down, they're slinging their head up to get their body down,
That's
just
right.
up, just about like my elbow did. I mean, they're
Watch it on
slinging-
video. It's a gyration.
For sure.
It is a
They do it
gyration,
now.
yes.
And so I like, if a deer ever has their head engaged with another deer or head engaged with especially if a buck's got his head engaged in a licking branch, I'm aiming at exactly the spot I want to hit. He's not ducking when it's like that. It's like when they're standing out there feeding on a food plot, that's the best time they're going to duck. But the majority of times I'm trying to hunt deer where they're, I'm using the food plot, but I may not necessarily be on the food plot to hunt him. If you can catch deer in those transition zones, they're just so much more calm and at ease, not around a bait side. I mean, I know it's legal to bait. I'm not knocking anybody that baits. If you want to bait, that's fine as long as it's legal. But like when you're not hunting around bait, man, they act so much different. Like if you're hunting over bait, like they are skittish as all get out, especially a mature buck.
Well, you can't, but you can't. I mean, you're stuck with whatever the situation is, and here you are about to take a shot. So, it could or it can't be. All I'm getting at it, and I know probably all bow hunters, but it's worth mentioning. Always aim for the heart.
Yeah.
Always. I mean, if nothing goes wrong, you make a lethal shot, about the most lethal. But you've given yourself so much more room in case they do.
Yeah.
And especially if it's out there. The worst, actually, it seems like a little further, the sound isn't as bad from whatever little bit of noise a bow may make. And there's about honestly, at 50, even with the speed of today's bows, 15 or 20 yards, they can get away from you so fast. There's a sweet spot that's actually worse. I mean, my favorite shot is like 20, 25.
Yeah.
But honest, if you're not, they can get away from an arrow right there. It's crazy, especially a doe.
Yeah, I've bought that farm in Tennessee is just overrun with does, and we decided we were going to only bow hunt it, and but man, we needed to kill a lot more does, and so I'd started taking like some 40-yard shots on does, and I learned that I can't hit a doe at 40 yards on that farm. And I'm a good shot, like I can kill deer farther than that, and I've killed deer farther than that, but I cannot hit a doe. She literally will. And I video it so I can figure out what I'm doing. Like I can aim low and still miss them because they're wheeling out of the way, or they're just that.
I shot
athletic
one
and dodgy.
time at 40 yards, which is probably I shouldn't have done, and the deer ducked and turned to leave. I hit the opposite side of the deer and killed it.
How about that?
That's how quick she dropped and wheeled and caught her right through the boiler room on the opposite side.
Yes.
I caught one right here.
So while we're here talking about this farm, maybe needing to use a rifle to help take some numbers down, have you played around with suppressors? We've been messing around with some Nosler suppressors, and we've been real impressed with them. Are you recommending that for folks?
I would. I mean, I started shooting rifles on the farm, especially my little boy. Man,
That'll change your life.
I take him all the time, and man, he's hammered the does for me, and he loves to do it. And so it takes a year to get one. So I ordered one, and it came in last year. We got to hunt with it the very last day of the season down in West Alabama. So I hadn't had experience, but one thing I like about it is
Careful, you're getting close there. Careful.
I'm a big advocate of him shooting, but he hates earmuffs. And that gun's so loud, like, man, it hammers my ears. And sometimes, you know, we're sitting there and a deer comes out quick and he don't have time to get earmuffs on or whatever. And like, I know how bad my ears are because I've been shooting my whole life without any hearing protection until the last few years, but I don't want to damage his, and I want him to be able to hear a turkey when he's 40. So, you know, I'm trying to protect his, and like, I'm a huge advocate for it, especially for kids, like, because you can just...
You're going to love it if you hadn't had one. You will love it.
I don't think it changes. Like, I've noticed deer, most of the time when I shoot a deer with a rifle, no matter where I am, what farm I am, if you shoot them and drop them, deer don't even leave the field. They just look over like, why is he laying down? And then at the same time, we've shot deer, and right after, had more deer to come to the field, not even fazed by it whatsoever. I feel like deer are more boogered up when you shoot one with a bow than you shoot one with a rifle, because just about every time they're going to take off for that first 30 yards until they fall over dead.
The Furminator is the industry's most versatile piece of food plot equipment, allowing plotters to do every step of the process, working the soil, adding seed and soil supplements, and compacting, from start to finish with a single implement. It's hassle-free by design. Set it for the seed size and simply drive the tractor, and the Furminator does the rest. Check it out at thefurminator.com.
Nosler is known for their bullets, and now they're making suppressors. Nosler suppressors are made for hunting. Adding a Nosler suppressor to your rifle will make you a quieter, more accurate, and more effective hunter. Protect your hearing and disturb less game with a Nosler suppressor. The time to hunt quiet is now. Learn more at nosler.com.
Stuff they don't understand probably spooks them more. I will say I've learned that from experience of many, many years. If you have a place, you lease a place, whatever, and you light into it with a bunch of people too, and you're in the trees and you're hunting in the woods, and you're bow hunted all the time, you'll actually make your deer spookier that way than just sniping a few at the fields with rifles. Yeah. And everybody thinks maybe the opposite, but because, you know, what goes back to what you said, your intrusion everywhere with that scent will make them crazy nocturnal if you're not careful.
Yeah. Laney, you got anything on your agenda we need to ask? I've hit a lot of stuff with him.
You know what I would say though, he didn't go to school. You know, there's no university teaching all this, and so I would
just go to Auburn.
Yeah, but I mean,
I didn't take a single wildlife class.
Did you not?
My granddad told me there wasn't no money in wildlife.
So he was able to overcome that, like Bobby hadn't been able to.
That's what I was.
So what I was just making a point to everybody to learn from him is that he has made it a point to always pay attention, make notes, make a mental note. You know, and learn from his experiences as opposed to just keep on hunting and say, oh, this is the way I do it and being hard-headed. Because I swear, the older I get, being hard-headed is probably the single biggest thing to hold you back. You know, this is just the way I do it, and that's I don't care what anybody. Well, just tune into nature and let it teach you. That's what he's doing. I mean, maybe you learn different lessons than him, but learn those lessons. That's the point.
I think he's a little more observant than the average guy.
He's no way.
That's what what my wife says. She says I'm very observant, but and that's the whole reason why I went to the saddle. Is, man, I love a lock on. Like, that's my bread and butter. Like, when I can go and set a lock on up, that's how I want to hunt, or even a climber. But like, really like a lock on. But now I've got kids, and my son, he's travel ball, baseball, and he loves baseball. He loves hunting too. But like, so my time is split now. I don't have as much time as I used to have to go and really set everything up like I want it to. And I realized, man, I am spending so much time on the farms trying to set all these lock-ons up for specific hunts. And like, I may go hunt those lock-ons once or twice a year. Like, I'm that, picky about how much a stand gets hunted. And if the wind's not right or if the conditions are not right, it does not get hunted. Like, you stay out of it. And so I'm hunting fresh stuff every sit. And that's why I went to the saddle, because now I can even tweak, like, maybe this is the right area, but with this certain wind and this certain condition, this is the right tree. And so that's why I went to the saddle thing. It's just one more thing to kind of help me, add to my repertoire of being able to hunt where I want, when I want, how I want. And so it makes me more mobile. I don't have to spend near as much time dealing with stands. I can devote more of that time into habitat improvement or whatever and be successful still.
Yeah, that makes sense. Lanny, we're going to get you a saddle.
No.
I think you ought to try. I don't think you ought to be so listen to what Toxie was saying. You can't be quite as hard-headed about things.
Man,
Hey, I made fun of it
make-
like crazy. Like I literally, I had so many buddies that kind of went into it, and I told them,
makes too much sense to be crazy. I mean, it just makes a ton of sense.
It's one of those things that everybody's adopting it, so I'm just being anti for no reason.
Yeah, hard-headed.
Hard-headed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that,
I got a little bit of that.
I wasn't looking at anybody in particular when I was throwing that bullet down range. I mean, it would have hit me if I'd have thrown it.
Alan, did you bring us a trivia question?
Well, I kind of already asked it.
Was that the one?
That was the one.
We got that one right. Then.
Yeah,
So,
y'all nailed it.
You owe us a T-shirt.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're still 100%. We're undefeated over here.
So how does Bobby get an answer right? That's the trivia question. And the answer is Laney answered it for him.
Or Toxie.
No.
Yeah.
I think I answered that one.
You did answer that one.
Yeah, the 8 to 12 pounds
Yeah.
of dry forage.
I'm gonna.
Were you on Facebook?
I must have been on the phone. I didn't hear that.
I feel like there's something else we need to ask. I'd like to just kind of, if we threw out some, and I don't want a long explanation. I'm just going to ask you a couple of. And Lanny will too. Toxie probably. I'd like to throw out like in your food plots, how important is like winter wheat, and you just say, "Oh, I love it." All right. So let me just hit a couple of them with you. So winter wheat for the first one.
Love it.
Radishes.
Good.
Buckwheat.
I like using it as a companion with joint veg.
Yeah.
Joint veg, haven't done.
Yeah. So let's talk clovers, reds, whites. Let's go
Perennials,
there.
annuals.
I like to have annuals in my just ones that I'm planting every single year, but I have learned that you need some perennials on the property because there's going to be some years you're going to be dealing with drought, and those perennial plots will get you out of a pinch whenever your other plots hadn't come in yet, and they seem like they have a lot more of the benefits. Like I like to have a diverse, like some of both on every property.
Makes sense. So, do you have a percentage in your mind? Like, well, I'd like to have,
Well, it can be also not necessarily the percentage, but like the nature of the plot. Like, is it going to grow a fall food plot well, or would it be more suited for a perennial plot? They can handle a little bit more shade. And, sometimes those areas that fall food plots don't do as well, perennials will shine. And then size. A smaller plot, I'm going to go more towards perennial clover because it can withstand more grazing pressure.
Yeah. What about oats?
Oats. I love oats too.
Cereal rye.
Not as big on cereal rye. That's probably my least out of the cereal grains.
We don't use it much, but we did last year because we had a complete failure drought.
Yeah, we had no choice.
Sahara Desert, Death Valley. It was so depressing. And so what we did find out with a little help from research is that it is best at germinating cold and growing cold as opposed to some of these others. Yeah. So for that reason, we did plant, and it did come up and
and then even the spring it had
saved
some good turkey food heads on it.
What about brassicas?
Brassicas, like I actually on that little for that velvet hunt, I actually added a little feature in adding those brassicas in early because typically if you can get especially more like the turnip type side of thing, not necessarily the radishes, but get those things in there. They really sprout really quick, really easy.
They grow so fast,
and then the deer hit them like they were.
Yeah, they won't. The best thing about them if you get them in early, but you have to time it right because it can stay too warm and then they'll bolt and then you'll lose them. But they'll grow so fast and they're not as desirable when it's so hot, and then you'll get a lot of tonnage first. Which is the key to all these plots. You get a bunch of tonnage up there first before they start hammering them. If they start grazing from the second they come out of the ground, you're done. Yeah. So that's one reason I love brassicas a lot for that reason. They don't. People say, "Oh, mine didn't eat them at first." Just be patient.
Yeah,
you'll be so proud they didn't.
And sometimes I like a little bit of a smaller area of the brassicas instead of planting like a whole 2-acre plot of them. I may mix brassicas in a whole 2-acre plot, but like. Sometimes when you just do like that little small spot, it's like that's the first spot of the field they come and hit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I noticed forever we planted the biological what we based the business on originally, and they would come. First time I've ever seen deer go in a food plot and just put their head down and eat. Because normally they eat, and then they'll move, and they'll eat. They're averaging their diet to try to pick up some different things. But they would walk out there, and literally, we were just all kid about it. I've never seen them do it. They just go in and just sit in one spot and eat and then leave from not ever walking around the whole food plot.
Yeah. So right in front of your bow stand.
Yeah, you hope.
Yeah, it's a winner. But chicory.
Chicory, I like it. It's kind of in the blend that I'm planting, and it's but it's one of those deals where it's not a lot of it. So I hadn't had a lot of, but I have seen deer hit it really, really hard July and August.
It could be a good
September.
insurance policy in a drought summer.
Sure.
So.
Sure.
It's kind of odd. It seems like you plant it, then you don't see it for 8 or 9 months, and then all of a sudden there it is.
When your plot looks dead, go back and look in there, and you start seeing it.
Yeah.
Like your fall plot.
We did a podcast a few weeks ago on alfalfa. Do you ever try it?
Man, that's something I'm wanting to try. The guys,
It's an art form in the South now.
yeah, the guys up north, they swear by
Oh,
it.
yeah.
You know, Midwest, it's just really, really awesome. I just feel like with a lot of things that we're dealing with down here, there are some people that are successful in it, but I think it's one of those things you're going to have to be kind of monitoring it and kind of
Yeah, you need to live near it.
yes. And I just don't have time to fool with.
What about winter peas?
No, I don't really care for winter peas.
What about cow peas?
I
Summertime.
love cow peas. They're great.
Another
if you
one
can
that
plant
you
'em-
could actually grow in a high deer density.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What about soybeans?
I hadn't planted soybeans in a long time. I love them if you can grow them. I mean, if you got a 10-acre field,
But for a
sure,
small
but
food plot, they're tough.
Yeah.
If
I don't
you,
waste my time with soybeans in anything less than 10 acres.
Yeah, that really makes a lot of sense.
I mean,
Unless
the-
you've got electricity, that can help.
the food plots, I mean, the electric fence is going to be the way to go.
Yeah.
I believe more and more people are going to get tight with their buddies at Gallagher and do that. For the first time, we got a beautiful sunflower field, and for me, in 10 years, totally due to that. And it will keep them out of the beans too, because if it'll keep them out of my sunflowers, it'll keep them out of the beans. So I'm gonna be investing in some more Gallagher fences. I'm telling you.
Yeah, the guys, my row croppers now over in West Alabama, like it's a really large farm, and it's got a lot of row crop on it. In fact, it's probably more row crop than it is even huntable acres right now. And even the big row crop guys, they are having to fence their big giant production beans because the deer and we're hammering does. I mean, we killed 20 does.
Your deer are migrating. I'm convinced those deer they talk about, they'll migrate 5-6 miles in the summer. And I'm not every day. They'll migrate, and that'll be just like elk move to a summer ground and then have a whole, winter ground. It's crazy how they will migrate now to these big ag areas if they can get beans in the summer. And
so it's highly attractive, and like they're having to put what they do is just one strand of hot wire all the way around the perimeter of it may be a 30-acre field, and I'm like, you're having to fence off 30 acres? He's like, yeah. And like what they do is they leave 10 rows out of the hot wire. They put it up right when they plant, one strand of hot wire all the way around it, but there's 10 rows that they leave to the deer. And that 10 rows, you come back 2 weeks later, and you got beans this tall inside, and then beans that tall outside.
or nothing.
Tells the story.
But then after that, they've gotten their jump. Yeah. It's held the deer off long enough. Now deer are jumping in and still getting in the hot wire.
They say actually a little nibbling on the bean is like the fruit tree syndrome. The stress of a little bit of feeding on them will actually make them put out more. Not maybe a wives' tale, but a drought condition will make a fruit tree put out a lot more. It's like a survival thing. And so I don't think they mind, as long as they don't mow them to the ground. Once they've started putting pods on or started that, I don't think they mind them nibble on them then. That's when the beans mean more than any time is that July, late June, July, early August, because that's when they're putting the finishing touches on their horns. Yep. That's when they grow the fastest, and that's typically when all the good food shuts down.
Yeah, that's when it's important.
That's when the beans are so good.
Alan, we've enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for having me.
Tell me, what's the biggest deer you've grown on one of your places? Can we put it?
I shot a 169 and a 167.
Come on.
Off of same farm.
Yeah,
that's a good
in Alabama.
In Alabama,
I echo that.
How about
you can
that?
do it. You can do it in Alabama.
They're freaky. The 169 actually was missing about 14 inches of drop tine. He broke it off.
Oh,
so he would have been a booner, but.
Well, I hate that for you.
Yeah, it was all right.
Congratulations
I was
on
happy.
growing that.
I'd be stoked about it no matter what.
Well, last time you were here, I think you said guys can find you on Facebook, and I friended you on Facebook. You
Yes,
hadn't
sir.
accepted my friendship.
I
yet,
did.
But so, guys, y'all go look up Alan Summerford on Facebook.
So just be careful whenever he's throwing all these accolades down. He is laying a trap, and
He
you'll
will be
so
calling
hypnotized. You'll
in
look up, and
February.
there he is sitting in front of you in March. So be careful.
You ever seen the movie Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Yeah, with the sneaky guy.
Yep.
You underestimate my
my
sneakiness.
sneakiness.
Yeah, well,
I don't.
I think we need to go fishing. Is what I think we need to do.
Oh, he's just reeling you in for a turkey hunt. I'm just
Yeah.
Oh man,
It's funny how many guests that we have that just, and then Bobby's inviting all these guests, and it's like amazing how they all have a great place to turkey hunt.
Yeah.
it is amazing.
There's a method to his madness for sure.
Oh man, Richie, we got anything else we need to add?
No, you guys pretty much hit everything on it today.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Touch
did.
them
Been
all.
deer week. I love it.
Yeah, we knocked us out of another afternoon of going deer hunting. That season's open, so
Well, I'm
Thanks,
sorry about
Bobby.
that.
at least we kept him out of the woods too.
Well, Tox going to go get on a bulldozer, no doubt.
No, I'm fixing to go see my dad.
There you go.
I got a text from him. It's like, I'm lonely. I hadn't seen you since yesterday or 2 days ago. I checked that a minute ago. So I'm going
Gotta
to
get by
I'm going
there
to go
right
see
now.
Mr. Fox is what I'm fixing to go do.
Well, I was blessed. I guess it was Sunday afternoon. Saturday afternoon, got to see him at that dove shoot.
He did come there Sunday. Yeah, that was pretty special.
I'm glad it got out.
yeah, he did. That was awesome.
It was.
And he went to the foxhole. Everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Even people in the company hadn't seen him. Like Paradise hadn't seen him like 3-4 years.
Oh, yeah. He got to
because he
see
hadn't
him.
been out as much, and he got to see. But a lot of people did that night. So yeah, it's every day's a blessing when they get to be 94.
Well, give him our love, and there's a lot of people listening to this that would say the same thing. To
I know
him,
they
so,
do. I know, and we feel it.
Yep. Alan, thank you. Lanny,
Yo.
you got a lot to do. I know you got a busy afternoon.
got
Hey,
lots
everybody!
to do.
Look, hey,
Let's
everybody
go.
out there, celebrate! It's that time of year again.
That's
Go-
right. I love a long list and stuff to do.
Yep.
Yeah. Why don't you say goodbye, Lanny?
Goodbye, Lanny. Get us out of here, Richie. Who's supposed to do that? Where's Dudley? He's elk hunting.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.